Welcome, my weird witches. You've found Raven's Lorecast, where folklore, fire, and a little fierce honesty all meet in the same cauldron. I'm Raven Lorekeeper, storyteller, witch, and your unapologetic guide through myth, magic, and all the places the world told you not to wander. This podcast exists because magic deserves to be honest, witchcraft deserves to be inclusive, and every one of us who grew up other deserves a place to finally exhale. So pour yourself something comforting, settle in, and remember, the world may not have been built for us, but the magic was. Weird ones, come sit with me. Not at the edge of the circle, not hovering, not half present, not waiting to be told what to do next. Sit here, because today we begin something that is not flashy, not fast, and not meant to be consumed in a single breath. Today we begin The Witch's Tools. This is the first episode in a series that will unfold slowly over years, because real craft is not learned in halls or checklists or starter kits. Real witchcraft is built through relationship, and every relationship has to start somewhere. Not with power, not with command, not with fire or blade or invocation. It starts with where you place your hands. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by witchcraft, by the tools you're told you need, by the aesthetic pressure, by the unspoken hierarchy of who looks legitimate and who doesn't, this episode is for you. Because before witches had wands, they had surfaces. Before ritual tools, they had cloth. Before altars became curated, they were simply places where something sacred was allowed to rest. The altar cloth is not decoration. It is not an accessory. It is not there to impress anyone. The altar cloth is earth. It is boundary. It is containment. It is the agreement between your inner world and the physical one that says, here is where my magic may land. And that matters more than almost anything else you will ever place on an altar. This episode exists because too many witches are taught to reach before they're taught to ground, to collect before they're taught to claim, to perform before they're taught to prepare a place that can actually hold what they're calling in. We are not doing that here. Raven's Lorecast does not rush foundations. This is not a show about tools as objects. This is a show about tools as relationships. And like any good relationship, we're starting with consent, care, and context. You don't need money for this work. You don't need perfection. You don't need to replace anything you already have. What you need is willingness to slow down, to look at what's already in your hands, and to understand why witches across cultures, centuries, and traditions began their work with cloth. Because cloth remembers. It remembers hands. It remembers repetition. It remembers prayer woven into survival. It remembers women working quietly while history pretended not to notice. And if you're wondering why this is the first tool we're honoring in a multi-year series, the answer is simple. Nothing else works properly without it. Every bowl rests on something. Every blade returns to something. Every candle drips onto something. If you don't choose that something with intention, the work still happens, but it happens without you fully present. Tonight, we change that. We are not summoning. We are not manifesting. We are not chasing outcomes. we are preparing a place. So take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the urge to do it right loosen its grip. This episode is not about doing. It is about making room. Let's begin at the surface, the quiet, underestimated place where witchcraft learns how to stay. Before we talk about altar cloths, we need to dismantle a myth. Witches did not begin with tools. They began with hands. Hands that cooked. Hands that cleaned. Hands that stitched. Hands that buried the dead. Hands that delivered babies. Hands that knew which plants healed and which ones killed. Tools came later, slowly, as extensions of work that was already being done. And that matters because modern witchcraft culture has a bad habit of reversing the order. It tells people to acquire before they understand, to decorate before they ground, to perform before they prepare. Historically, witchcraft did not emerge from ritual spaces. It emerged from domestic spaces, kitchens, fields, doorways, bedsides, tables that served 5 different purposes depending on the hour. And the first altar was never an object. It was a cleared place, a section of table wiped clean, a cloth shaken out and laid down, a boundary quietly declared in a world that did not care whether women survived or not. This is where the altar cloth enters the story, not as ornament, but as infrastructure. Every tool a witch uses does something very specific. It defines space, it contains energy, it directs attention, it protects the practitioner. It signals transition between ordinary and sacred time. The altar cloth does all 5 before anything else is added. In folk traditions across Europe, the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, cloth was used to separate food preparation from ritual work, protect surfaces from wax, ash, blood, oil, or herbs, mark times when a table was no longer just a table, wrap objects that carried spiritual weight, absorb repeated prayers over time. In other words, cloth wasn't chosen because it was pretty. It was chosen because it worked. In modern elemental systems, earth often gets reduced to crystals and stones. Historically, earth was anything that held shape, bore weight, and endured repetition. Cloth qualifies. It is grown, harvested, spun, woven, dyed, cut, and sewn, each step a transformation of raw matter into something usable. Linen comes from flax, cotton from wool, wool from living animals, silk from cocoons. Even synthetic fabrics carry the imprint of industry, labor, and transformation. Cloth is earth because it is processed matter made stable, and stability is the first requirement of magic. If your working space cannot hold energy, the work leaks. If your surface isn't defined, intention diffuses. If nothing marks the boundary, your nervous system never fully arrives. The altar cloth tells your body, this is different now. That alone is powerful. One of the most persistent mistakes I see new witches make is treating the altar cloth as an aesthetic backdrop. That's understandable. We live in a visual culture. But the altar cloth is not there to frame objects. It is there to hold them. Historically, cloth was used to prevent spiritual residue from contaminating daily space, absorb excess energy from repeated workings, protect tools when not in use, anchor magic to a specific location. That absorption matters. Cloth remembers. Not in a mystical woo-woo way, But in the same way your favorite sweater remembers your shape, repeated contact leaves imprint, which is why you don't casually toss an altar cloth in a drawer and forget about it, and why, traditionally, cloths used for spiritual work were folded intentionally, stored separately, wrapped around tools, washed with care, sometimes never washed at all, depending on the tradition. There is no single right way, but there is awareness. Here's the part people don't expect. Your altar cloth does not need to be purchased as an altar cloth. Historically, altar cloths were inherited linens, cut down tablecloths, scarves, shawls, napkins, work aprons, pieces of clothing no longer worn, burial shrouds in some cultures, baby blankets, wedding fabrics, remnants saved because they felt important. The cloth mattered because of relationship, not labeling. Ask yourself, does this cloth already hold memory? Has it been present during meaningful moments? Does it feel steady when you touch it? Can it create a clear boundary on a surface? If yes, it qualifies. If not, no amount of symbolism will fix that. Another myth to dismantle: you do not need a single perfect altar cloth. Historically, practitioners used multiple cloths, often rotated based on purpose, season, life stage, type of work being done, and availability. A small cloth for daily practice, a larger one for ritual, a dark one for ancestor work, a light one for blessings or healing. Not because of color correspondences, but because context matters, and cloth helps your nervous system track context. That's not superstition, that's embodied awareness. We're starting the Witch's Tools series with the altar cloth because it costs the least, it asks the most awareness, it teaches containment before power, it centers care before command. You cannot rush this tool without misunderstanding the rest. The altar cloth teaches you how to prepare space before you act, and that skill will matter when we reach blades, fire, offerings, divination tools, objects that amplify intention. Before an altar cloth becomes a tool, it must be introduced to the work. Not activated, not empowered, introduced. Because witchcraft is relational, and relationships begin with consent. This is not a dramatic ritual. It is not performative. It does not require special tools or perfect timing. It requires presence. Step 1, the clearing, removing what isn't yours. Lay the cloth flat on a clean surface, a table, a bed, the floor. Smooth it with your hands, not fast, not mindlessly, slow enough that your body notices. As you do, say out loud or under your breath, anything that does not belong to me, anything that is not mine to carry, anything that came from another time, another hand, another story, you may leave now. If the cloth is inherited, secondhand, or repurposed, this matters. You are not erasing its history. You are clearing its role. If you feel the urge to shake it out, do so. If you want to open a window, do it. If nothing happens, that's fine. Magic does not always announce itself. Step 2, claiming or defining the relationship. Place both hands flat on the cloth. This is important. Not hovering, not gesturing, contact. Then say, from this moment forward, you are a boundary. You are a surface of intention. You are the place where I meet myself honestly. Notice what shifts when you say it. This is not about commanding the cloth. It is about naming the agreement. You are not asking it to be sacred. You are stating what you will use it for. That distinction matters. Step 3 is the charging, or teaching it how you work. This step is subtle, and most people rush it. Don't. Sit with the cloth for a few breaths, then answer this silently or aloud. What kind of work will happen here? Is this cloth for grounding, for learning, for protection, for daily practice? Is it meant to hold quiet work or heavy work? You don't need poetic language. Plain truth works better. Then say one sentence, just one, that reflects that truth. Examples that you can adapt as needed. You will hold steady when I am learning. You will be the place where I practice without fear. You will witness my work and keep it contained. After that, stop. Do not pile meaning on top of meaning. Let the cloth absorb repetition over time. That's how tools learn. Once claimed, your altar cloth should be treated intentionally, not delicately, but deliberately. You may wash it, you may iron it, you may fold it and put it away, but don't forget what it's for. Historically, altar cloths were folded in the same way every time, stored separately from everyday linens, sometimes wrapped around other tools, handled with clean hands when possible. Not because they were fragile, but because attention is part of the magic. If the cloth becomes stained, torn, or worn, that's not failure. That's evidence of work. This ritual teaches 3 foundational skills every witch needs: boundary setting, intentional relationship, containment before action. If you can't do this with a piece of cloth, you're not ready for blades, fire, or calling. And that's not judgment. That's apprenticeship. Once your cloth is cleared, claimed, and charged, it becomes the ground every other tool stands on, which means when you move forward, you're not building magic in the air. You're building it on something that knows how to hold. Nothing else works cleanly without a surface that knows what it's doing. The altar cloth is not passive. It is not secondary. It is the quiet agreement between you and the work that says, I am ready to hold what comes. And that is where real witchcraft begins. All right, my weirdlings, now we step outside. Not with our bodies, with our attention. Because tonight's sky is not decorative. It is instructional. And if you've ever wondered why witches across cultures developed tools, not just prayers, not just trance, not just instinct, this sky answers that question very clearly. February 15th, 2026, places us beneath a waning crescent moon, just 2 days before the new moon, the thinnest visible edge of light still clinging to the dark. This is not a moon for beginnings. This is a moon for clearing space so beginnings have somewhere to land. A waning crescent is the moon at her most honest. She is not performing. She is not illuminating everything. She is showing you exactly how little light is actually required to remain present. This matters, especially for an episode about tools. Because tools are not about adding power. They are about directing what remains once excess is stripped away. Under a waning crescent, magic is not expansive. It is selective. This moon does not ask, what do you want? She asks, what are you still holding that you don't need to carry into the next cycle? This phase governs what stays, what goes, what must be set aside, what destabilizes the work if it remains. This is altar energy. not because of beauty, but because of function. The waning crescent understands that placement matters, that containment matters, that the difference between chaos and clarity is often not intention, it's arrangement. So before we go any further, I want you to hear this clearly. If your magic has felt scattered, if your practice feels emotionally potent but practically ineffective, if you've been doing all the right things but nothing is landing, this moon is telling you something very simple. You don't need more magic. You need better containment. That is what the altar cloth teaches. That is what this moon reinforces. Now let's talk about the sun. The sun is in Aquarius, and Aquarius does not care how things have always been done. Aquarius is innovation, vision, systems thinking, and the refusal to accept inherited structures without interrogation. Aquarian energy is why witches didn't just feel magic. They engineered it. They built containers, tools, frameworks, because intuition without structure burns out. Aquarius understands that liberation requires design. Under a sun in Aquarius, magic stops being instinct only and starts becoming method. This is why it is no accident that this episode about the altar cloth, the foundational tool, unfolds under Aquarian light. The sun is illuminating not your emotions, but your process. It's asking, how do you set your space? How do you prepare before you act? How do you separate sacred from mundane? How do you return to center when things fracture? That's not philosophy. That's engineering. Now let's talk about the slow-moving alignment underpinning everything right now. Saturn conjunct Neptune, meeting at the threshold between Pisces and Aries. This pairing occurs only once every 36 years, and it is not about action, not yet. It is about form meeting dream. Saturn is structure, boundary, containment, reality. Neptune is spirit, intuition, disillusion, the unseen. Together, they do not create motion. They create a vessel. At this threshold moment, where Pisces dissolves and Aries prepares to initiate, the sky is asking a very specific set of questions. What will hold your work? What defines your sacred boundary? What separates ritual space from the rest of your life? What keeps your magic from leaking into chaos? That is altar cloth work. Saturn says, give spirit a form it can rest on. Neptune says, let that form remain porous enough to breathe. This is not casting energy outward. This is preparing the surface where energy can safely land. And because of that, this is the right moment, not later, not during a ritual, not during a spell, to tend to the altar cloth itself, not to activate it, not to use it, but to clear it, choose it, claim it. Under a waning crescent, you don't consecrate by adding, you consecrate by removing. This night also unfolds within eclipse season. With an annular solar eclipse occurring just 2 days later, eclipse season compresses time. They collapse distance between intention and consequence, inner world and outer world, belief and behavior. Under this sky, alignment is no longer theoretical. The cosmos is saying, if you want coherence, your space must match your soul. You don't need louder prayers. You need clearer surfaces. The altar cloth is the first place where inner alignment becomes visible. It is where chaos stops wandering and starts sitting down. Let's look at the rest of the sky through the correct lens. Mercury in Pisces. Intuition speaks symbolically. Your cloth may be chosen by feeling, not logic. Venus in Aquarius, authenticity over performance. Your altar does not need to look like anyone else's. Mars in Aquarius, action is strategic but restrained. Preparation is the work right now. Jupiter in Cancer, growth comes through protection and care. First, you build the ground it will stand on. Nothing here is rushing you forward. Everything is saying, prepare the place. Above you, the winter constellations don't move quickly. They hold. Orion stands steady. Taurus anchors. Gemini balances duality without resolving it yet. Cancer shelters. These are not casting stars. They are keeping stars. They remind us that before humans ever raised wands or knives or words of power, we laid something down, a skin, a cloth, a boundary, and said, here. So let me say this plainly, without mystical frosting. This sky is not asking you to do more magic. It is asking you to give your magic somewhere to land. The altar cloth is not passive, it is preparatory. It is the difference between scattered intention and sanctified space. Tonight's sky is a lesson in restraint, alignment, and readiness. Not yet, but soon. All right, weird ones, come closer. We've spent this episode talking about threads, surfaces, and sacred containment, about the altar cloth as the place where intention is given somewhere to rest. And now we're going to anchor all of that into something you can actually taste, something warm, something enchanted in a quiet, domestic, almost mischievous way. Tonight, we're making the weaver's dumplings, a spell disguised as a meal, or maybe a meal disguised as a spell. Either way, this one isn't just food, it's teaching. Because dumplings, they are containers, little stitched together worlds, soft boundaries that hold exactly what we choose to place inside, which, if you think about it, is the entire lesson of an altar cloth. And if you're feeling Nana hovering nearby right now, yeah, same. So let's breathe, roll our shoulders back, and begin. Here's what you'll need and why it matters. For the filling, or the heart, 1 can garbanzo beans drained, 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, 1 tablespoon blackberry preserves, 1 teaspoon gluten-free soy sauce or tamari, 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon wasabi paste. Trust it, just a hint. Pinch of salt and black pepper. A splash of lime juice for brightness. These ingredients aren't random. Garbanzo beans are grounding, sustaining, the worker's bean for stamina and inner fortitude. Garlic, protection, truth, clarity. No illusions survive garlic. Blackberry, an old symbol of weaving fate, crossroads, and sweet resilience. Soy or tamari, balance, depth, grounding. Wasabi, clarity without cruelty, heat that wakes you up, not tears you apart. This filling is a little strange, a little unexpected, the in-between, just like you. For the dumpling wrappers, the vessel, 1.5 cups sweet rice flour, mochiko, 1/2 cup warm water, and 1 tablespoon of neutral oil. Rice is ancient, sticky, dependable. This wrapper is the altar cloth of the recipe, the surface that holds energy without leaking it away, the boundary that allows intention to remain intact. For the veggie side, or the blessing, broccoli florets, carrot slices, yellow bell pepper strips, olive oil, salt, pepper, sesame oil, or ginger powder. These bring brightness, nourishment, and life to the plate, not as force, but as expression. In a food processor, add the garbanzo beans, garlic, blackberry preserves, soy or tamari, wasabi, salt, and pepper. Blend until thick, spreadable, and fragrant, like midnight meeting dawn. Taste it, not for perfection, for honesty. Ask yourself, what am I ready to hold? What am I brave enough to name? What sweetness am I finally willing to allow in? Adjust as needed. You're not just cooking, you're listening. In a bowl, mix 1.5 cups sweet rice flour, 1/2 cup warm water, and 1 tablespoon of oil. Stir slowly. Let it come together like wet silk. Knead until smooth, pliable, patient. This dough represents the altar cloth, the chosen surface where energy can rest without scattering. As you knead, say quietly, what I hold, I honor. What I weave, I tend. Your hands understand this even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Pinch off tablespoon-sized pieces of dough. Roll it into balls. Flatten into small circles. Spoon in a small mound of filling. Fold the dough over and pinch the edges closed. No fancy pleats required, just a seal, a boundary, a decision. Each dumpling becomes a little world, intention held safely inside form. If one tears, patch it. If one breaks, repair it. If one refuses to cooperate, laugh and keep going. This dish teaches patience, containment, care. Tools are relationships, and dumplings will absolutely tell you who you are if you listen. Warm a pan with olive oil. Add sliced shallots and let them soften, releasing their sweetness. Add the dumplings gently, like placing something sacred where it belongs. Let them brown, not burn, brown. Once golden, remove from the pan. Spoon the shallots over them. Nothing wasted, everything integrated. Preheat the oven to 400 degrees. Toss vegetables with olive oil, salt, pepper, sesame oil, and ginger. Roast for 15 to 20 minutes until edges just char. These are not force, they are expression. Nourishment that meets containment without overwhelming it. Together, the filling is intention, the wrapper is boundary, the vegetables expression. A complete system on a plate. Sit. Before the first bite, speak this charm, soft and steady. What I gather holds me. What I weave shapes me. What I release frees me. Goddess, grant me this. Then eat. This is magic entering the body through care, not force. Make extra dumplings. Eat them over the next few days. Each time, remember, small rituals repeated with intention are how magic becomes memory. All right, my weirdlings, wipe your hands, fold your cloth, and meet me back at the fire. Come back to the center with me. Not the dramatic center, not the ceremonial flourish, just here. The place where your breath settles back into your body and your nervous system remembers that it is allowed to rest. We've talked tonight about the altar cloth, not as decoration, not as aesthetic, not as something you buy to look witchy enough, but as the first agreement. The moment you say, this space is different, this surface is intentional, what happens here will be held with care. That is not a small thing. In fact, it's foundational, because before any spell is cast, before any tool is lifted, before any prayer is spoken, something has to be laid down. A boundary, a surface, a place where spirit knows it can arrive and not be scattered. That's what the altar cloth is. And that's why this episode matters more than it looks like it does. I want to be very clear about something as we close. This episode is not a one-off. It is the first step in a multi-year Witches Tools series. One episode each quarter where we slow way down and give each tool the respect, history, and practical grounding it deserves. Not, here's a list, not, buy this, buy that, not, do it exactly like me, but why these tools exist at all, what they were meant to teach, and how they change the way music lives in your actual ordinary life. This year, we're starting with the tools that hold. This quarter, the altar cloth, earth, the surface, the container, the agreement. Next quarter, the censer, fire and air, breath, smoke, transformation, attention. After that, the chalice, water, receiving, holding emotion, devotion, memory. And at the end of the year, a spirit tool, often a crystal, chosen not for trend, but for identity, direction, and becoming. Each one builds on the last. Each one assumes you're not rushing, because witchcraft that lasts is not built on urgency. It's built on relationship. So if part of you is thinking, do I need to go buy something? Am I behind if I don't have this yet? What if my altar cloth is literally just a scarf? Good. That tells me you're listening. You do not need to acquire anything tonight. You do not need to be ready for all the tools. You only need to notice this. Where do you already lay things down with intention? Where do you already create a surface that says, this matters? That might be a table, a windowsill, a folded cloth in a drawer, a corner of your desk, a place you return to when the world gets loud. That counts. The altar cloth doesn't demand perfection. It asks for presence. As you move into the days ahead, I want you to carry one simple truth with you. Magic does not begin when you act. It begins when you prepare a place. What you lay down shapes what you can hold. What you tend becomes what tends you in return. And every tool we will meet in this series is just another way of learning that same lesson from a different angle. So take tonight gently, fold your cloth, or imagine folding it, or simply acknowledge the places in your life where you already create care without calling it magic. That too is witchcraft. Thank you for walking this threshold with me. Thank you for choosing depth over rush, relationship over performance, and patience over spectacle. We'll meet again next quarter with smoke, breath, and fire. Until then, lay things down with intention, choose your surfaces wisely, and trust that what you prepare is already preparing you in return. As always, to the work that holds us and the hands that remember how, wit, wisdom, witchcraft. Thank you, my weird witches, for giving me a little of your time and your beautiful attention today. If this episode stirred something in you, a memory, a spark, a question, a fire, please share it. Spread the word. That's how our circle grows. You can find me on socials at ravenslorecast on Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky, and at ravens_lore_cast on Instagram and Threads. And if you've got a question, a story, a spellcraft request, or just the world's cutest familiar photo, email me at raven@ravenslorecast.com. I really do read them. Until next time, keep your fire tended, your humor wicked, and your heart brave and wide open. This is Raven Lorekeeper, signing off with love, grit, and a whisper of magic on your path.